Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, Nassir Little out as a member of the Suns in a last-minute move as the offseason comes to a conclusion. Cut, waived, gone. Why did it happen and what does it mean? Coming up next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, as well as your host Monday through Friday here. Hit follow, subscribe if you haven't already. Become an everyday or get locked on to the Phoenix Suns each and every day. We are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for about a week. Back to daily. Get caught up, get locked on to everything going on with this team by hitting follow, hitting subscribe, wherever you are. Become an everydayer. Start your days off with a little dose of the Suns. All right, joining us as he does every single week is Stephen Perjone-Garner. He is a writer over at Bright Side of the Sun and a contributor to the All City Network. Stephen, we got some news to talk about, which is uncharacteristic for late August, but here we are anyway, which is nice to have. Nassir Little has been cut, along with EJ Liddell. That was more of a formality. We'll focus on the Nassir Little side of things here today. I want to let everybody know first, though, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial free of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll talk more about them later in the show, but let's get to the news. So, Stephen, the Suns cut Nassir Little. This is a guy we talked all offseason about as a trade candidate. He had a salary that was bigger than most of the guys on this team. He's a young dude. He got here last year and had some promise. Didn't really pan out, but hey, he's only 24, 25. And now he's off the team. They're stretching his contract. They'll pay him $3.1 million over the next 7 years. What was your reaction when you saw the news come down that they were just cutting bait completely with the guy that, a year ago we were saying, hey, could he break out here?
My first thought was that they might be a little bit more confident in at least one, if not both, of the rookies that they drafted, which by the time I was able to even complete and confirm that thought for myself, Shams quote tweeted his original tweet saying quite literally that they're confident in both of their rookies that they signed in Dunn and Iguodala. So I like that. I like that kind of aligned with my natural kind of train of thought and process. But the other thing that I led to right after that was, okay, so now they have a little bit of roster flexibility in terms of open spots. Either they're looking to stash 1 or 2 spots for a future move to come, which inevitably I feel like is going to happen with at least one of 3 particular players on the roster. And then the other thing was, naturally, are they going to look to fill those gaps with some more players on the margins? Like you mentioned, bereft of wings, I think that would be naturally a position that they would look at. One name that came to mind for me, maybe bigger than any other one, kind of sort of literally, but also figuratively, Robert Covington. Player that's bounced around, played with multiple teams, multiple contending teams, played around multiple configurations of rosters, inside-out teams, outside-in teams, in-between teams, teams that play small, teams that play big, switch-heavy, teams that play in rotation defensively. He's seen it all. He's done it all. He's been effective in that role. Also, obviously, Jay Crowder is another player that comes to mind within that type of mold of player as well. Player that spent time with Mike Budenholzer as well. So that's just something that I think would be relevant for the Suns to kind of at least gauge. But that's just kind of where my mind went initially.
Yeah, I think that's a great roadmap. We're going to hit each and every one of those things. My mind went on a similar little journey, and I was like, it just sort of surprised me. And then the more that I looked at it, the financial side of it came into play a little bit more and made more sense, I guess, because so let's just break down what exactly this move is. So again, EJ Liddell also technically was part of this report, although in my mind, I've been considering him cut since they got Tyus Jones. They were technically holding 16 players up until today. I don't know if every Suns fan necessarily realized that was kind of where things stood, but Liddell was the guy that they traded David Roddy for. Roddy had a little bit of a higher price tag and obviously some team options and everything down the line, whereas Liddell made a little less money, and had less kind of baggage. So he was bound to be gone. They can't roster 16 guys once the season actually starts. So then that's done. Nassir Little, though, was due to make like $6.8 million, $6.75 million this year. To not just brush past the 7 years that I said earlier, the reason that is going to be the case is that they're stretching him. And I don't know if the Suns have stretched a guy, but I'm sure a lot of Suns fans have heard that term. You just multiply the amount of time left on the contract by 2 and add 1 year, and that's the amount of time that you then stretch the salary that they're due over. So in this case, it was about $22 million over the next 3 seasons. That becomes $22 million over the next 7 seasons, which is equivalent to 3.1 per year. And it sounds crazy to say you're going to have something on your books for 7 years, but Steven, then you look at it and you realize that number plus a minimum contract is less than Nassir Little was going to be making this year. And apparently the way that the contract structures and everything work, they had to do this by August 31st because that is the time frame where they would have been allowed to stretch him. So we'll talk about in the next segment if that's all this was. But the more that I thought about it, I at least got it from that standpoint. And really, to me, I think the biggest big picture takeaway from this move is they couldn't find a trade for this guy because clearly they didn't want to keep him on the roster. And I think this tells us that if there had been any interest around the league for a trade that would have made sense for both sides, that would have happened already. And it just didn't. So I guess maybe, hey, they were trying. Is that like a silver lining to this? They tried to move this guy and it just didn't happen.
That's what I was gonna get to. And you at the end you said exactly what I was gonna say. I was like, seems like they've been trying to trade Nas, likely not in tandem with any player in the hierarchy of the Suns that's positioned higher than him. Naturally, they weren't able to find anybody in kind of this dead zone of the off season where we're getting close to training camp and deadlines for rosters, all of that fun logistical stuff. So yeah. Best wishes to Nas. I think he can still be an impact player on the margins for a team. He just has to find some consistency, especially offensively, with wherever it is he does end up signing with.
Yeah, I mean, right? We didn't see him. You didn't see him being a factor this season, right? I mean, so I saw some people saying, "Hey, the fact that this was so late kind of screws him over." And like, I get it. There's not a ton of wide open roster spots, but this does give him some time. He'll be in a camp somewhere and they're doing right by him to a degree. They didn't wait until cut day to do this. He can hop on, and he's a young guy.
Yeah, I think he's a player that he hasn't bounced around, but he's kind of struggled to find a niche and role with the teams that he has spent time with. Obviously in Portland prior to Phoenix, and then we saw what this season was, had opportunity early, and then really just couldn't find consistency, couldn't find his footing at any point the rest of the way. Had like maybe a 1 or 2 game stretch here, and then would kind of just disappear. So it's all about for him finding consistency. I think he has the opportunity. I think the Brooklyn Nets would have been a team that made a lot of sense for him. Now, naturally, I don't know what their roster count is at, but they just signed every single wing that's become available this offseason, pivoting from the Mikal Bridges trade and everything. So I think he would have been the right type of player for their context. Don't know if there's something there, but I do feel like he's a player, again, that can contribute once he finds some consistency. And I'll definitely be intrigued and kind of tracking a little bit where he does end up and, how that kind of comes about.
All right, let's get to whether this was just purely financial. Is it just, hey, we're not going to play this guy, he makes a lot of money, let's just cut bait? Or were the Suns thinking, we got a guy in mind, we need a roster spot, this is our way to do it? We'll break that down coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Or as I always try to tell you from a Phoenix standpoint, that little flap right in front of your face when you're driving on the interior. You don't realize you miss it until it's gone. Or if you're driving downtown a lot and the potholes are killing you, maybe a wheel cover. That's just my experience. Really, truly bought it on eBay Motors. Had a great time finding it, tracking it down, spending as little money as I ever thought I could. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Alrighty, Steven. So again, to recap, the Suns are going to pay Nassir Little instead of the full $6.75 million that they would have owed him if he had just stayed on the roster. They're going to pay him $3.1 million as a result of the stretch. They can potentially add a player at a minimum contract around $3 million and still duck under the amount that they would have paid Nassir Little big picture. So when I present it to you that way, do you think that's all this is? Or you list some names at the top of the show. Do you envision this being more about freeing some space up to pursue somebody specific that's still on the market?
I feel like when you get to this point in the off season in terms of transactions, there won't be like a thirst or urgency from a franchise to go, oh, I have to have this player on my roster. It's the margins. However, the tricky part with that, when you do nail those margins, when you get in a situation where injuries might happen, or you just find a player that just is undeniably a perfect fit for your context, you just kind of have to make that move. And, obviously you're talking about the tail end of your rotation, if not just, a space eater for your roster. But having that player be someone that you can rely on to contribute, even in high stakes moments potentially, I think there's value in that. And the one name that I did mention was Robert Covington, because I do feel like he's a player that can certainly suffice in whatever role it is that Mike Budenholzer would look to have him play with this roster. And I just generally think that, like you also mentioned, the fact that you're losing Nassir Little, you already don't have that many true wings on your roster. I feel like having Robert, even if the only role that he plays for his entire tenure with the Phoenix Suns is to help provide some guidance in terms of someone that can relate to the direct role that Ryan Dunn is likely going to play for this team going forward, there's a home run fit on the margins with that in terms of the value. So I would like to see someone like Rocco brought into the Suns context. I feel like he's a player whose name has been in Suns rumor hemisphere for the last 7 to 10 years, so kind of collecting those.
One of those guys. Yeah, we got Thaddeus Young finally in the Valley. Maybe it's time for Covington too. Yeah, those guys that just never, the rumors never go away.
Exactly. That's kind of where I'm at with that as far as that open roster spot goes.
Yeah, look, I think I tend to. It's clearly to create a roster spot. I mean, obviously, I think even if you make the case, and I calculated it out for everybody to at least understand that it's still pretty relatively insignificant, the difference. You're not going to cut a player and do all the upheaval that creates just to save a handful of millions of dollars. I don't think, right? Like I have pointed out in the
penny pinching at all.
That's true, but just to play devil's advocate for a second, he basically did cost saving moves with both Dario Saric at the 2023 deadline and campaign last summer. Now, were those guys going to be difference makers? No, but that's kind of where they are with Nassir Little, right? Like he has shown that he'll do penny pinching if it's for players who aren't going to affect the end result of the team. And so maybe that's all this is, but I agree. I think you want to, at the very least, it's going to create the roster spot, and you're not going to be surprised when you end up with the potential to sign somebody. So I'm sure they have some kind of game plan here. I think Covington makes a lot of sense. I would be a little bit curious why he's been unable to really break through in a rotation the past 2 seasons, despite only being in his early 30s. It's been a little bit weird for him. 48 games one year, 29 last year. I don't know if that's just a Ty Lue doghouse thing or that is something health-wise. I don't know the answer to that. That would be a question on my mind. I sort of think that this is really just going to come down to creating some flexibility for in-season moves, whether that is a trade of somebody on the roster right now where the Suns receive 2 players in return. Remember, they can't combine 2 players of their own, but they can get 2 players back from another team if it adds up to the right number of salary, or just a buyout player, which we saw that they've taken advantage of the past couple of seasons and definitely been aggressive about. So I think that they will go into the summer or go into the season with 14 players, unless they already have that trade up their sleeve. That would be the only wild card here, but I don't think that they're going to sign even a Covington or Markelle Fultz or any of these guys. I think that it's either a trade right now that we're not expecting, or they just keep that roster spot open and take advantage of it once the transaction cycle gets going when the season starts.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, there's not going to be an urgency to add a player. I did say I would like to see Rocco, but I would err on the side of having an open roster spot to give yourself that optionality, because I do feel like one, if not potentially two, of Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, and Josh Okogie, because of the type of contracts that they're on, which are very team friendly, also very movement friendly. I feel like at least one of those three is going to be moved by the trade deadline, if not potentially two, depending on how things go prior to the trade deadline for the team. I think they'll be looking to adjust the center room with a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more defensive rim protection activity. And then I also think they could potentially be looking to add another wing, a true type of wing, to kind of add a little bit more depth, add a little bit more versatility and scheme and player and rotations and things like that.
So you kind of got us there. I know, you're covering the Mercury game. We're doing a recording right here, but maybe the people at home can join me, and it's obligatory. Steven brought us to the 1 yard line. I'll take it to the end zone. Take a shot. I'm talking about a Jusuf Nurkic trade. Everybody, you're welcome. It's here. The time has come. Knock it back. Whatever your drink of choice is, it's time. Nassir Little gone. I don't get to do that one anymore, but Jusuf Nurkic trade buzzword bingo card is there for you guys. So yeah, but I mean, look, I don't know who it's going to be, but I think I've been saying it, and I'm not going to change my tune if it's Nurkic or anybody else. This team's roster right now is not going to be what it is game one of the postseason if they make it that far. So whatever that trade looks like, they now have a little more flexibility to do it. But you mentioned the rookies. Let's talk about those guys, because like you mentioned, Shams Charania, he doesn't drop stuff like that of his own accord randomly. If he is saying that the team is optimistic about those guys, I believe it. And honestly, I don't even have to believe it, because the president of the team, Josh Bartelstein, in a couple different interviews now, has gone out of his way to say that he thinks those guys can contribute. So let's tease that out. Is that realistic? Is that as soon as opening night? Is that the end of the season? Where do we see those guys factoring in? We'll break it down next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a ton about FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, as football is back in our lives, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game all year. Well, at least for those 3 weeks, but hey, you're going to keep it going after that. You're going to love it so much. All you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime if it's not quite what you're looking for. I'm going to be honest, I've never bought it. I was already starting to think, is this finally the year? And the idea of, hey, drop a little money, have some fun on FanDuel, and then maybe get 3 weeks on them and then go, that sounds pretty nice. It is cool to watch teams that are not the Cardinals who just depress me. And maybe it's a little bit of an avoidance strategy. You never know. If your team starts to suck, you got something else going. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's number one sportsbook and take advantage of that YouTube TV offer with NFL Sunday Ticket. All right, Steven, let's close it out. So, tell me this. We've talked a lot about the rookies. We've been in imagination land for a while during the dead of the offseason here. Let me put it to you this way. Paint me a picture of what it would look like for Ryan Dunn to crack into this rotation sooner than later for the Suns without the jump shot coming along. Because if it's going to happen soon, he's not going to magically become a great shooter it's August 21st. It's not going to happen by November 1st. That's unlikely. So what does it look like for him to contribute and fit on this roster and earn minutes, even if he's not a good spot-up three-point shooter?
Well, I will continue to tap the sign on this team needing blue-collar play from the perimeter for any of their desires in terms of their ceiling or where they hope to be going into the playoffs. For any of that to come to fruition, they have to compile some blue-collar activity from their guard, perimeter-oriented group. And it's not on the offensive side of the ball I'm speaking to. It's on the defensive side. And naturally, I think in tandem with that template of the team, Ryan Dunn and his calling card defensively, or his calling card in general with his play, has become with him being a stopper on the defensive side of the floor. I think that for Ryan Dunn, if he comes onto this team and in the allotment of minutes that he's given just to kind of assess from Mike Budenholzer and company early in the season and even in training camp and preseason, if he comes out, he's averaging 2 steals, a block, and leading the team in deflections. I think all of those things are going to be, first of all, what the team needs from his particular role, but also what Mike Budenholzer is going to be expecting from him. And I think that's naturally going to allow for him to carve out a niche with the team. And then naturally it also allows for the minutes when he's on the floor to uptick in terms of pace and tempo, playing a little bit more on the open floor, playing off of stops, playing off of turnovers especially. I think that's going to be an important piece for this team to kind of figure out. And if he can bring that early on as a template and foundation for everything that he becomes as a player going forward, I think that's a home run for them.
How much time can they – because I think of last year, right, early in the season when Beal was out and Book was intermediately out, and Josh Okogie had to play a bunch. And you would look at the stats, the on-off and everything else. Their offense would just crater when Okogie was out there. Obviously, we know the value that he provided defensively, but teams just learned quickly, hey, we don't have to guard him. It's going to cramp things up. That's how you get these KD ISOs and ugly shots and low efficiency for Durant early in the season and all the dominoes. Not like it's all Okogie, but that was the heaviest minute guy that created some of those problems. Can they put Dunn on the court for 20 minutes? Do they even want to? Do they even need to? Or are we talking about let's see what he can do in 8 to 10 minutes and go from there?
I'm thinking it starts the latter, 8 to 10. And then, if the activity levels are there, if the discipline is there, if he's understanding of how to combat the coverages he's seeing to keep the offense and optimize spacing, more than likely via cutting, but also via some screening. I think there's value in screening on ball and off ball, I'll note. So I think it's more so the latter, but also my other big thing with an asterisk next to it going into the season with his minutes in particular, who's he on the court with? Is he on the court with more traditional point guards? Are they going with more of the big three plus him and insert player here? And are those configurations small, or are they going more traditional with the true center on the floor? Because if obviously you go with the true center, you're doubling down on the spacing or lack thereof in terms of being able to give space for players. If you're putting him at the 4 next to KD or whoever else, I think that looks a little bit different. It allows for him to play with a little bit more space too. And that kind of lets you take away some of the things that kind of inhibit him on offense.
Another thing, I don't want to get anybody drunk while they're doing this here, but me talking about small ball lineups is another thing that tends to be dangerous for the audience. But since you graciously took us there, we'll keep it there. I think that's one of the big things. And I was going to say, to me, that's why some of Dunn's rim protection ability is one of the things to watch with him. A sneaky way that he could counteract the limitations that are going to be there if the offense doesn't come around, just for the team to be able to stay afloat while he's on the court. If he can protect the rim and do some of those big man defense things, then treating him like a center on offense is a little easier. If he's also playing like a center in some ways on defense, they're going to struggle to rebound if they're playing that way. We all kind of know that, but that would maybe get you closer to breaking even from a point standpoint and a spacing and a structure standpoint than just, like you said, putting him out there in a more traditional lineup and just biting the bullet on it. So he's been a great rim protector in college, and he showed a little bit of that at Summer League, and I'm optimistic it can happen. You mentioned Durant. Can you have him out there with Bowl? Can you have him out there if they want to play some zone more than we're thinking? If he can be a real difference-making help side defender, then that goes a long way to just getting a little more creative with him. So I'm not out on the idea. I also am kind of wondering, is Josh Okogie reading this stuff? What's he thinking? He's like, hold on, I want to at least play. I don't want to just be a trade chip here. Let me get on the court. But hey, you're not the young guy anymore. What about Iguodaro? I guess I saw that in the report, Steven, and you mentioned it too. And I was like, okay, yeah, there's one less player on the team and one less guy in the way, but there's still two centers in front of him now. Nassir Little wasn't going to be playing any center. So I still think unless there's an injury, which they got two older centers ahead of him, he's going to get some minutes. But I guess I just don't really see Oso. This didn't really open much up for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that part. I'm still not quite sure or confident in any train of thought that I've kind of traveled to with the center group, how Iguodaro's minutes are going to fit into the template rotation wise for Mike Budenholzer. Because if we're talking about them spending time playing in small ball renditions, which for the record, I will say I feel Mike Budenholzer is a whole lot more likely to be more experimental with rotations than Frank Vogel showed to be last season. It's not going to take him until near the All-Star break to finally start trying to use on consistency small ball lineups. That's going to eat into the entire center group's minutes, especially when Yusuf Nurkic goes to rest. So not sure where Iguodaro's minutes are going to come. Could he potentially play ahead of Mason Plumlee at some point if they get the type of confidence that Shams' tweet is saying? I guess we could see it. I just don't see it at this moment in time, but it's going to definitely take some work and skill development for sure.
Yeah, I sort of look at it like early in the season, it's unlikely, but if they aren't able to really make a move, whether that is a trade or somebody becomes available on a buyout or something that allows them to increase the versatility of their center rotation, then they might just be forced to try Iguodaro more, right? Like they might just have to say, let's see what this guy can do, because we know that his skill set is different. He's more mobile, he's more athletic, he's a better finisher, he can switch better on defense than the other two guys. If we're in late March, early April, and those three guys are still the only traditional bigs on the roster, they might just have to bench Plumlee even if he's playing well, which will be kind of a weird thing, and I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it here. But yeah, I don't think that this move necessarily creates that opening. But yeah, I think all things considered, this is a totally logical move. I could see it just being business as usual. I also truly, because I've learned to never doubt this team being crazy, Steven, I could see on Friday something that we're not expecting just pops up and it's back to the roller coaster of being a Suns fan and follower here in the Valley, and we're just back wondering, how did we miss this? What on earth is going on? This changes everything type thing.
Yeah, one thing about the NBA, especially in this present climate, you can't be – if you're surprised by things happening, that's not their fault anymore. That is 100% your fault. Things are just so sporadic these days. You have to be all accepting and all receiving because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Things aren't as predictable as they were even just 3 or 2 seasons ago in the present day of 2024.
That is not a Nassir Little jersey behind me. That is a Mikal Bridges jersey, but for all intents and purposes, it could be either one. I hope that you at home got your EJ Liddell Suns jersey. Never forget the moment in time where he got to be part of this franchise, and that all is over now. We'll see what they do from here as the roster continues to take shape ahead of opening night, and of course, hopefully what they want to be another championship push. One step closer here with this move. Enjoy your Thursday. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. I will try to be back with you one more time this week. That is the plan. I did have a little trip to Flagstaff to move my little sister into college, so that's the scheduled delay this week, and we'll try to cram one more in. If not, we'll be back Monday for sure, and I will talk to you guys then.